Hi, my name's Matthew Whitehead and I'm going to be demoing the new MQ beta for MQ Lite. The beta is available now to download for Windows and Linux, and there's a PDF on the website as well which talks you through everything I'm going to be doing in this demo. So let's switch into the VM now, and we'll work through all the steps to configure your queue manager with the beta and then attach MQ Lite clients to it. So you'll need an MQ8002 queue manager installed if you want to work through this demo yourself. You can get the beta driver either for Windows or Linux by going to the enterprise messaging area of the IBM DevWorks site. I'll put a URL on the screen after I do this. We'll quickly go through what's in the beta, how to install it and apply it to your queue manager, and then what you can do with it once that's done. So on this Linux machine, we'll have a quick look in this directory, and what I've got here is just the Linux gzip file, which is what you get when you download the driver for Linux, and then the PDF that you can also get on the download site. We'll have a quick look at that just to show you what's in there. Ultimately, if you want to work through the contents of this demo yourself, you can do so by getting hold of this PDF and following any of the sort of line-by-line instructions that we have in here. So Chapter 3 shows you how to apply this beta to a Linux queue manager, and then Chapter 5 talks you through some of the commands you can issue to start using AMQP channels, which is what this beta ultimately adds to the queue manager. I'll talk more about that as we go through. So the first thing I'm going to do is just extract the beta code, and I'll then just tidy up these files because we won't need those for the demo. So what I'm left with is a new MQ RPM. So that looks pretty much just like a regular MQ installable, because it is, and we've also got the CritMQ package command and the repackaging script. So if you're installing this into a secondary MQ install, you'll have named that install something to distinguish it from the primary install. You can see on my machine, if I do the RPM command with -QA, I look for the MQ series RPMs I have. I've got the server, the runtime, the Java and JRE components, and they've all been repackaged with an AMQP suffix. So before I do anything, I'm going to just run the repackaging tool, and I'll specify the same suffix. I think I have to be root to do this, and that'll just repackage that RPM ready to install. So that's all done. We'll just have a quick look in my opt tree. So under I've got a couple of installs. Under opt-MQM I have a 7.5 installation of MQ. That's not the one we're going to be using for this. I've created another installation under MQM AMQP, and if I look in here, if I run disp MQ on that installation, you can see it's an 8002 queue manager. And that's where we're going to do the install to. So I'll need to use the -- prefix option on RPM when I install the RPM that came out of the repackaging step. The RPM I've created goes under var /temp, and then under MQ RPMs, and that's the AMQP directory I need. And then under here, we'll just list that directory. I've already got all the other RPMs from when I originally installed the queue manager, and it's added to that list the AMQP one that I'm going to install. I don't need to reinstall the rest. So we'll go about reinstalling or installing that RPM now. So I need to run that as root again, -UVH, -- prefix again. I need to specify the same install location for this RPM. And I'm only going to install the AMQP RPM into that directory. So there we go, that's the RPM installed. What we can do now is go and have a look at that MQ installation and see what's changed. Now when I list the contents of the install route, you can see there's a new directory that's been added called AMQP. That contains all of the code to run the beta. So if we go into AMQP, you can see there are a variety of files. The first one we'll need is the AMQP LAP tool, which is the license acceptance tool. That's because the beta has a different license to the MQ product because it's just in beta phase at the moment. The first thing you'll need to do when you're running the beta is to accept the license by running that script. You can see that it's an early access release. So I'm just going to hit 1 to accept that, and just get a message to say that you can start the AMQP service now. Just looking again at that directory, you can see there's a samples directory, and in there's a script called sample MQM. If you run that, that'll effectively run all the same commands that we're going to do manually in this demo. So if you want to skip a few paces ahead, that will create a queue manager. It will define a new channel and start the channel. So if you want to kind of skip a few steps, come and look in the samples directory and run the sample script. But we're not going to use that today because we want to do everything ourselves. What I need to do first, we're going to bin and we'll just have a look at the queue managers I have on this machine. Right, so I've got a couple of queue managers. I'm going to ignore both of those. They're associated with my 7.5 install. So we'll create a new queue manager, and I'll call that QM AMQP, and we'll just wait for that to finish being created. What we also need to do, even though I'm running on MQ8 Fix Pack 2, I also need to increase the command level of the queue manager, because that will enable some of the new underlying function in 8002 that the beta relies on. To do that, use the *mqm command using the -e parameter, and you just specify cmd level equals 801, and then pass in the name of the queue manager to run that against, and you'll see that that should run cleanly, and you just get this message saying that 3 new objects have been created, and new functions up to command level 801 have been enabled. That isn't a typo that I've put in command level 801, even though it's the 8002 fix pack. It's because there wasn't a command level update in the 8001 fix pack, so that's just the next increment. The *mqm command, when you upgrade the command level, doesn't actually start the queue manager, it just goes through the update process. So we'll run *mqm as normal now to actually start the queue manager, and then let's do run mqsc to start doing some things with the queue manager. Now the first thing we can do, those 3 new objects that were defined when we upgraded the command level, we'll look at one of those. If we display the channels on this queue manager now, you can actually see there's the normal list of channels you get, plus this extra one here, this system.def.amqp channel, which is a new type of AMQP. So what this beta adds to MQ is a new AMQP channel type, which ultimately supports connections from MQ Lite client applications, or you can connect any AMQP 1.0 compliant client. So the channel is here to make it possible for you to deploy MQ Lite clients against your existing enterprise MQ infrastructure, but you can also attach other AMQP clients as well. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start an AMQP channel and connect some AMQP clients. The first thing we'll do, we'll just have a look in more detail at that channel type, because it's slightly different to some of the other channels you have in AMQP. So display channel all. You'll see there are sort of a few standard fields on this. Some you wouldn't normally have on a channel unless you've been using the MQTT channels. There's a port attribute here. An AMQP channel doesn't rely on a listener, an MQ listener, for clients to attach to. It actually opens the port itself. One of the reasons for that is because the AMQP channel is a Java implementation, so it's the JVM that opens the port and listens for connections rather than the MQ listener. So if you're defining a new channel, as we're going to do, you'll need to specify a port that your clients are going to connect to. The other attribute you may need to use is this MCA user attribute. At the moment, the beta, when an AMQP client connects, will need an MQ user ID to perform its authorization checks against. So when my AMQP clients connect in a minute, we're going to need them to be authorized by MQ as being allowed to do publish and subscribe messaging on the queue manager. So we'll set that MCA user in a moment to make sure that the subscriptions and the publications from the MQP clients work. Some attributes aren't actually supported in the beta yet, although they're present here. So the SSL attributes, setting those won't have any effect on the channel at the moment. They're not supported, but they're there for completeness. And neither will this use client ID attribute. Some of these fields won't have any effect on the channel operation, but we will be using port and MCA user. So I'm going to create a new channel rather than using the default one. I'll call the channel my AMQP, and I need to specify the channel type AMQP. I'm going to choose a port, so I won't use the default port. I'll leave that one for the default channel, but I'll specify 5673. And then the MCA user I'm going to set has to be an MQ user who's authorized to do publish and subscribe on the Queue Manager. So I already have one called M Whitehead. You have to make sure you've got a user who's authorized to do publish and subscribe, and then set that in the MCA user field for the channel. So I'll define the channel like that. Before we can start it, the other note of interest worth mentioning is that because this is a JVM based channel, it's actually controlled by an MQ service. So you may or may not have used MQ services before, but if we do a display command, display service star, you can see we have two service objects, the default MQ service object, and then this AMQP service object, which is used to control the JVM that manages AMQP channels. We can look in slightly more detail at that. And you'll see that it's calling in some scripts that you shouldn't have to worry about, but also that its control is set to manual. Now, MQ services can either be manually controlled, whereby you have to start them explicitly yourself, or they can be under Queue Manager controlled, where the Queue Manager starts the service, and in this case the JVM, automatically. So we'll have to start that service because it's not been started by the Queue Manager. You can change that value to Queue Manager, QMGR, if you want the service and the JVM to be restarted every time you restart the Queue Manager. So for now, I'm just going to start the service. And that's been accepted. Just as a sort of a slightly lower level check, in this other window, I'm just going to check that there's a JVM running under my opt-mqm directory, which there is. So that just gives me a little reassurance on this Linux machine that the JVM's running. Now we're free to go and start the channel that we created called my AMQP. And that's been accepted. And again, we'll just do a useful low-level check. We'll run the netstat command. So netstat -an TCP, and then pipe that into grep for any ports open that start 567. So we can ignore these bottom ones, but you'll see this port open in listen state is port 5673. So that's great. The channel started correctly, and we can of course display the channel. Specify channel type on that command, and you can see that we've got the that's the display channel command that displays the settings we put in when we defined it. We display channel status, I should have said. Okay, now you can see my channel is running. That's great, and there are no connections to it, that's as we'd expect. What we need to do now is actually attach some clients. So what I'm going to do is just minimize this VM. Right, so I've got two Windows command prompts. On the left hand side I'm going to run the Node.js sample sender that's provided with the MQ-like client for Node.js, and on the right hand side I'm going to run a receiver to get the messages. The first thing I've got to do is install the MQ-like client itself. Make sure you've got Node.js and npm installed before you do this. npm install MQ-Lite, and then I'll go off to the npm repository, download the MQ-Lite client. It should only take a few seconds and we're done. And then if we go into node modules and MQ-Lite, you can see that there's a samples directory, and in there are the samples we're going to use for this demo. So let's go into node modules on this window as well. On the left hand side we'll start sender, and on the right hand side we'll receive messages. So the first thing on the right hand side I'm going to do is run node with the receive sample. I need to specify a custom IP address because by default it will connect to localhost. So I use the -s flag and then specify the AMQP service I want to connect to. In that case, my VM is 192.168.56.101, and then I need to specify the non-default port that I use, which is 5673, and then just hit enter. And all you should see, let's close this. All you should see is that we get a message saying that I've been successfully connected to that address. I've been generated an ID, an AMQP client ID to use, and that's something the client's generated because I didn't specify one. So we'll be looking for that later in the queue manager. And we've subscribed to a topic string of public. On the left-hand side, let's clear this view. I'm now just going to run the sending sample, so run node again with the sender sample, and again I need to specify where to connect to with this address 192.168.56.101, and again the non-default port, and all that will do is send a hello world message and then disconnect, and the receiver will stay connected waiting for more messages. Great, so the sender sent hello world, the receiver got hello world. And what we can do is we can just have a look into the queue manager again. Let's go back to the queue manager itself. Now we should still see a client connected because the receiver is still connected. One way to do that is actually there's an option on the display channel status command when you're using AMQP channels, which will show you the clients who are attached to that channel. So that command is display channel status, the name of the channel. Again, we specify channel type. Then we just have to specify client ID with a wildcard, and that will tell us about all the clients connected to this channel. And there's just one, which we'd expect. And here you can see this client ID that was generated for the client, receive_7ca ... We can see the IP address that client's connected from. We can see the MCA user that it's running as, and that's because I set that when I define my channel. So any clients attaching to that channel will be allocated that MCA user. And you can actually see the message sent count is 1. That's from the perspective of the channel. So the channel has sent one message to this client, which is why it's a sent count and not a received count. So that shows us that attached client. There's another way we can do that because the AMQP channel creates an HCON into the queue manager for every AMQP client who connects. So we can look at that by using the display con call. So display con with a wildcard. We need to say the type of connection we care about is con, and then we're going to use the where clause to show only those connections that are used by this channel. So where channel equals EQ my AMQP, and I'll specify all so we get all the information back. And now you can see this one HCON that the AMQP channel has created on behalf of the client. You can see the channel name, we know that already. Again, you can see the con name that the client has attached from, so the IP address that this HCON is being used by remotely. And then finally, again, we see that this HCON has had set on it the receiver ID of the AMQP client. So you can see by looking at the cons into your queue manager which connections are coming from AMQP clients and which client IDs they are and which machines they're connected in from. So the final thing we'll show, but one of the benefits of connecting an MQ-like client to a queue manager is that we can then do messaging between MQ-like clients and MQ applications. So you might already have MQ applications that you want to reuse, or applications that act as sort of microservices in your system that your MQ clients need to connect to. So what we'll do to demonstrate that is we'll just use the regular MQ sample application, the AMQS subsample, which subscribes to a topic and waits for messages, and we'll just show that we can flow messages all the way through from an MQ-like publisher to an MQ subscriber. I don't actually have the samples installed in my 8002 install, but I'm just going to get the sample from the 7.5 install I have, because there's no reason not to. MQS sub. Right, so I'm just going to copy that into my current directory. So I've got this MQS sub sample we're going to run, I just need to set the library path to pick up the library path for my 8002 queue manager. QMQP. And then I should be able to run MQS sub. I just need to specify a topic string. Now the topic that the MQLite sample uses is public, so we're just going to use the same topic, and I will need to specify the name of my queue manager as well. So now the AMQS sub sample is waiting on the queue manager for publication. It'll wait 30 seconds, then it'll disconnect. So we just need to switch back. So we just need to switch back to the sending sample. We'll rerun that straight away. That sends hello world again, and you can see in my VM that the AMQS sub sample has received that hello world message sent from MQLite, and it's just waiting another 30 seconds to get the message. And we can also see the other MQLite receiver also got the second hello world message, as you'd expect. So you've got MQLite sending to another MQLite client and an MQ client. So I hope that was a useful intro to the MQ beta for MQLite. If you haven't actually tried MQLite itself, then I'd suggest going to the MQLite website to learn more about that and the different clients you can use. If you've got any questions or comments, please come to the forums on DevWorks or the DW Answers forums, or just contact me directly on mwhitehead@uk.ibm.com. Cheers.